Welcome back to Tan's Two Cents, where we dive deep into the tactics that win government contracts. And today we're zoning in on something that can either make or break your success: cost realism in your GovCon proposals. I'm excited to have Jeff Shapiro with us today. Jeff's a partner at Cohn Resnick LLP with a wealth of experience in government contracting and federal compliance. He's here to share his insights on how to craft winning bids by mastering the art of cost realism. Jeff and I have known each other for years, but finding us in the same time zone at the same time is challenging until earlier this year. So, Jeff, it's great to talk with you about this kind of complex and often controversial topic, such as cost realism. And notice I'm saying it properly, even though I have very, very big issues with the word. You're a brave man to undertake this adventure with me. So, please say hello to our intellectual listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Don, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. Love talking about cost realism. I know that's a rare thing to hear, but believe it or not, CPAs do like to have fun. And in my fun is talking all things cost evaluations on competitive uh, proposals to the federal government. All right, so a little bit more about me, more than just loving cost realism. I've been working in federal government contract compliance for over 20 years. Where I got my start in this specific area is when I actually worked in the government. I can say it out loud, but don't print it down in your marketing materials. But I used to work for the Central Intelligence Agency. And while there, I worked in their contract audit department. In that contract audit department, we were doing incurred cost audits, proposal audits, you name it, we did it. And one very specific task we were often given by our various procurement teams is to assist with cost evaluation during competitive source selections. It was a great opportunity to earn exceptional performance awards. So yeah, I was all about doing that to gain a couple extra dollars, but really getting that experience and being embedded with acquisition officials, both on the technical and procurement side, and get to really understand this cost evaluation process in depth. So I was there for 8.5 years. I ended up serving as the head of cost evaluation teams for some very large procurements, from services related to aviation to manufacturing, you name it. We did a little bit of everything there, as you may imagine. Since leaving the agency, I've served in industry. So I've actually worked as a CFO and compliance director within industry. So I understand what many of your listeners are doing when putting these proposals together. And now I've been at Cohn Resnick for about 8 years, serving both commercial customers, putting together price proposals and handling other compliance issues. But I also performed contract audits again. Remember what I said I was doing it within the government. Now here I am doing it as an independent certified public accounting firm. We are the primary contract auditors for the Department of Energy, again, doing full cycle of audits from, like I said, incurred costs to business systems to proposals, everything from pre-award to post-award we're involved with. And we do it for several other federal agencies as well. So I've got my hands in this every day. I play both sides, so I feel the pain of the people that I audit on a regular basis, because again, I'm a government contractor too. So I'm thrilled to share with you any and all of my experiences from my government side to now doing work with Cohn Resnick.
Never like that. That is like my worst nightmare, is to have to audit all the time. But it takes all kind of people, like in this business. So,
well, that's why
no,
I
that's
audit, most of the time, not all the time.
right. Right. You can't do that all the time. No, exactly. You need to take a break here.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, it's great to have you on the show. And before we dig into some of the details, can you share an experience where getting the cost just right made all the difference in securing that government contract?
Absolutely. So I'm going to tell you a story about a small client of mine. This is already going back 5, 6 years. They were maybe a $20, $25 million company, been providing services to DoD, in relatively small capacity, sometimes as a subcontractor and little dabbling as a prime. Well, they found an opening to really grow their business and a training contract for SOCOM. And the COO came to me and talked to me about, look, Jeff, I think the customer really likes us, really likes our people. We were able to get one of the key subs to be part of our team. I think we have a really good chance of winning this. And I was like, great, you got a great value proposition. I know, Tan, in your world, like that's what's going to win you the contract. So let's not fool ourselves. Price is very important. We'll talk about that a lot over the next, hour or so, right? But at the end of the day, usually it's your technical approach and your past performances that's mostly going to carry you there. But it's where it costs is where you can really fall down if you do it wrong or make it look like you don't know how to price or fully explain what's going to cost, how your technical approach is going to cost. And so when working with this small business, they talked about how lean they were. They talked about how low their wrap rates were. And I said, listen, I love that you have that. And that is certainly going to give you an advantage. But trust me, they've been doing this contract. This was a recompete. I should have explained that. They were trying to take over for a big name incumbent. And when you're going in there, when you're taking on those big name incumbents, yeah, you got to use your cost advantage. But just know that the government only knows what it's seen. And so they're going to take what you propose and compare it. Well, what have I been getting charged for this for the last 5 years? So when you come in with a wrap rate that's going to cause your fully burdened rates to be significantly less than what the government has been incurring for the last few years, they're going to ask a lot of questions, and you want to reduce the probability that they're going to take your costs and make an adjustment. And that's what we talk about, should costs or most probable costs, as defined by FAR 15404. So in order to establish that your low cost rate, low cut rate, however you want to phrase it, is realistic, you need substantive documentation and explanations for the government cost evaluator to believe you. Now, explaining estimates is always a little bit more of an art than a science, as I think you well know. But in numbers, you do have to be a little bit more scientific. The government is usually pretty smart in asking for budgets. But in terms of what other details it asks for to get to their conclusions, it may or may not be within those RFP instructions. So
Yeah.
it is incumbent on you as the contractor to explain, I have low wrap rates, and let me show you why. So we sat down for several days in a row, scrubbing those budgets and being forthcoming and not waiting for any potential discussions. I would never risk something like that. As you often see in some of these RFPs, we may award this without discussions. The government
Oh,
may
yeah.
elect not to have discussions. Do you really want to put forward a price that is very cost competitive without explaining why your cost is
Why?
realistic?
I think it's a challenge, right? Pricing people are not good at explaining certain things or explaining things in a way that a layperson would understand it. And vice versa. And so that's a really great example that you described there that I face all the time is I always encourage pricing people to be on technical discussions so that they understand, why we're doing what we're doing and so that it's not doing things in a vacuum. And I think a lot of times, more than not, pricing is done in a vacuum without any realistic like understanding of what it is that the technical people have proposed. And so you're right. I always say that proposals are lost on one of three reasons. One being pricing, and you priced it because you don't understand the customer, you don't understand their price point, the sensitivity, or sometimes you just don't understand technically how to price it. Or two, you lose the proposal on your past performance and your qualifications. You chose the wrong past performance, you don't have the right qualifications. And then 3, you lose it on your key people. And
Mm,
so, yes, at the end of the day, the technical usually is the more heavily weighted one, but you kind of have to look at the eval factors because it's not always, sometimes it's other factors that are pretty high in there. But I'm really glad that we're having a discussion on realism here today, is that it's not a matter of, to be cost competitive and to be cost realistic, like that you shave like shave an hourly rate by like a dollar or 50 cents or whatever it is. It's like it's a little bit more sophisticated than, kind of trying to balance the numbers out to come to a certain number. So yeah, let's really kind of dig into our main discussion here. And in segment one, we're talking about strategic introductions to cost evaluation. So I think before we go into, realism, we need to understand from an evaluation perspective, like why mastering cost realism is critical in government contracting, and how can it like to provide a competitive edge. So can you explain a couple of ways that we can try to be competitive with, in this
absolutely.
very complex world, because pricing is not my thing, and I've always said it's not my thing. So learning. I'm learning with our intellectuals here today.
Yeah. Look, proposal, uh, submitting a proposal is a team effort. It will always be a
So
team
let's
effort. And
let's talk about the cost evaluation. Yeah.
absolutely. So from a cost evaluation standpoint, I think it's important we take a minute or two to explain cost realism and cost reasonableness. You hear those terms thrown out all the time in section N's and section L's of RFPs. So I want to make sure we get this concept down. Cost realism is all about evaluating the risk that the contractor has purposely underbid in order to win the contract. Is it really realistic that the contractor can do it for such a low price? All right. And whereas cost reasonableness, not as much as a fear in competitive solicitations, because the competitive pressures will cause offers to want to bid relatively low, but still they still want to evaluate for the risk that certain uh, costs within your proposal are not proposed too high. All right. So now that we've gotten that quickly out of the way, let's, cost realism, like you said, and understanding how that is evaluated and how valuation teams, make potential adjustments. It's all about understanding how you explain how you came to your basis of estimate. And Tan, you were just hinting at, having those pricers really integrated with the technical team. I mean, I've evaluated, as I briefly mentioned, I've evaluated, I don't know, like hundreds of proposals at this point in my career. And you can tell the proposals where the cost team was involved, days before the thing was submitted. They said, great, we finally came up with this awesome technical approach, go price. And they just slap things together and quickly estimate and make assumptions about what the technical team is trying to do. And it's just impossible to follow. And when the cost evaluation team is starting to make assumptions about what the offer was trying to do, you're going to be in a whole world of hurt. They're going to have to make cost adjustments. And that only happens when communication is breaking down between your technical folks and your pricers. Maybe not only, but it primarily happens that way. So I can't agree with you more on that, Todd. I've seen that too many times. And how about, I'll be, it would hurt me not to mention at the top of this is, for you incumbents out there, don't just go walking in and saying, hey, listen, I've been doing this for the last 5 years and I know how to price this, and that this is how much it costs in the past and this is how it's going to go in the future. Great. That might be some substantiation how you came up with this price, but you better be following those section L instructions on, if it says, provide us a detailed budget that explains how you got to those estimates in your indirect rates or how you get to certain LCATs, you better start putting it. Don't just say, we've been doing this and this is how it is.
Mm,
Because I can tell you
right.
many stories where we've seen incumbents just rely on that, on that kind of an argument to say why their cost is realistic. Please don't fall into that trap.
It's kind of like the trust us. Like trust me, I can't quite tell you how it is, but just trust me.
Yes, yes. The trust us argument is not going to fly. Very important. Here's another tidbit for you. The evaluators can only base what they do, and this applies obviously for the technical side as well, to the criteria is laid out by the RFP. They
Right.
cannot look at anything else. The RFP says, based on the four corners, old school thinking, of the
Yeah.
pieces of paper that you submit under the proposal is what we're going to evaluate. And we're going to evaluate against the criteria as written in the RFP. I don't care what you did on the contract 2 years ago. Like, you may talk about it in your past performance. I'm good with
Right.
that. But if you're not demonstrating and explaining how you got to that cost, or how you can enable that technical solution to be performed at a certain cost without saying we did it, in the past under your contract, so you should understand it. It's not going to work. You have to go through the iterations and provide proof and other supporting documentation.
So is there something in the pricing eval factors? Like I always try to read the tea leaves and read between the lines of what they say, what they mean, how, like what are they thinking? It's like it's a game that I play. It's kind of like with
Mm,
when Q&As come out, I always try to read the answers to questions and say, oh, well, I think that there are like five different, offers here because questions were asked five different ways.
yeah.
Or like the customers answering questions in this way, it's this is what this is where they're leaning towards, whatever. Are there certain things in the like pricing eval factors that if I'm reading that I can like maybe like, oh, they say this is really kind of like they mean this, and this is what like you can kind of infer, maybe, you know, what
Yeah.
they think. Do
You're
you
making
have
me.
any of those? If yeah,
Yeah, I'm trying to think of specific examples, and I appreciate you putting me on the spot. The only thing I can think off the top of my head, and maybe I'll think of more later, is the contract. The government agencies sometimes will start publishing uh, existing price lists, so to speak. Not price lists,
really?
maybe that's not. I've seen it. DOE has done it. I can say it out loud. They said, listen, under the last 5 years of the contract, here are the rates we've been paying by LCAT. It's a really bold move,
No.
no doubt about it.
Yeah.
It's because it's pointing, it's saying, look, I ain't going to take any low cut rates under this, right? Like, if you
Right.
have a technical approach to approach this problem to make it unique, I want to worry about, essentially, I'm worried about the hours, right? I'm here
Yeah.
telling you, here's the floor that I'm expecting. Don't try to play games with the rates. Like, most of these people are unionized people, or they're subject
Right.
to wage determinations. Don't even try screwing around with any of that. Instead, I need you to really focus. If you're going to, you're going to come in really low, because you can see the, per
Yeah.
sand data now. I got to say it, instead of FPDS, it's hard to get used out of the old
I'm
habits.
still gonna say it. I'm sorry. I'm still gonna say it.
Yeah, FPDS. Thank you. All right, I'll go with the old, just like saying Tina. All right, let's not go there. Um, I know what the costs
Yeah.
are for this contract and what's been historically. I can look that up like anyone else. So
You can reverse engineer
if the
them.
government,
Yeah.
yeah, so the government is now saying, look, I'm going to give you the darn rates that we've been paying, so you don't play any games with this. Now you're just like, oh, this is all about unique approaches to how I staff the problem. How many hours I put into this and how I can commit to those hours. That's a huge challenge. So yeah, so that's a big tell. If
Yeah.
it's happened a handful of times, I've encouraged it. I said, listen,
That's a big.
like, yeah,
Sorry. I got to put you on the spot at least once or twice here during this podcast. So you did great.
bring it on, bring it on.
Bring it on. I hear you. I hear you. All right. So moving on to our next segment here, which is mastering the art of cost realism and real reasonableism. And y'all coming up with some really difficult words for me here. So how are we going to be able to ensure realism and reasonableism are accurately reflected in your proposal? And what strategies do you employ to balance these assessments?
Yeah.
Could you share some
Look, as a former cost evaluator, make our job as easy as possible. Don't enable us to have to make assumptions. I already said it once. I'm going to say it twice, and I'll probably conclude with that. So you need to talk about,
assumptions are
how
bad?
did you do that? Yes, it's fine for you to make an assumption, right? So let's talk about this for a minute. If in the RFP there's ambiguous language about, the government property that's being provided, or access to old data, whatever it may be, ask those questions up front. Okay,
Yes,
don't create
yes.
yourself for your problems. When you're at the proposal process, be like, we'll just throw in the assumption and put it in there. You know what? I would ask the question, and yeah, I guess there's going to be certain
Someone
points where
else
it's
will
like, well, if
ask
I,
it.
yeah, don't assume someone will also ask. But I think the point I was going to make was, if you ask the question, are you going to be giving away your competitive advantage? It's very rare in that situation. If anything, I don't want to take this discussion away from what we're talking about in cost evaluations, but like, Q&As is a great way to ghost your competitors, right? You start asking about, well, are you only going to, you know, are you only going to consider technical approaches that involve quantum computing or AI or whatever, so there's a way to do that. But when it comes to cost assumptions, let's not go too far astray. Understanding what you're going to walk yourself into. Can I take over the legacy software that's there? Do I will have rights? Anything that could potentially impact costs. You need to ask those questions if it's not clearly written within any of the documentation out in the solicitation. And when you start, and if you are gonna, if you never, you don't get that satisfactory answer in those Q&As, lay out those assumptions. But look, we tried asking this question, you answered it this way, so this is the approach we took in terms of getting access to a facility, having access to software, materials, whatever it may be. So explaining assumptions, explaining those great bases of estimate. A great basis of estimate is not, I took subject matter expert judgment, and this is what I thought it would cost. I get it. Yeah, I get it. That has to be used. And when you look at the many guidebooks that are out there on cost estimating, there's like 7 or 8 techniques, and guess which technique is the least reliable in cost estimating? It's that subject matter expert. And don't get me wrong, especially in R&D and type environments where it's like, until I get my hands on this stuff and start playing with it, I really
Yeah.
don't know. And when you get to that level, do your best to try to explain it. Like, listen, I worked at this other site doing something somewhat similar, and this is what happened. And so we took that basis and picked it up and said, this is the best comparable example I have. So you often can't go out to a vendor or a subcontractor and be like, hey, build me this widget that I need under this prime contract. And then you picked up that quote and threw it in the proposal. Yeah, that's the traditional way to propose many ODC or subcontract costs. But there's plenty of efforts where you're going to have to really swag it, right? But explain how you got there is certainly the way to do it. So for realism and reasonableness, it's detailed explanations, meeting all the requirements of the RFP. There's a reason for why the government asks for all that stuff, and that could be a separate discussion about when they give you that exhaustive list that provide me you know your GSA list, although that should be public, so they shouldn't ask you for that. Give me your you know, subcontract proposals, your ODC quotes and material quotes, whatever it may be. Obviously make it as easy as possible, make it traceable. Often they have that cross-reference
Yeah.
matrix. That's really, really important. If they don't ask you for that cross-reference matrix, put it in yourself, so there's no mistaking that you did not meet the requirements of those RFP Section L instructions. So map those out, show how you met all that, and then take that extra step and put yourself in the shoe of me. I know, as glamorous it is, say, like, if I was evaluating this objectively, can I understand how you got to the cost that you did? It's a very basic question, but often the question you go, wait a second, I've always come up with my prices. We've always been doing it this way. And then we have this unique, cost estimating relationship that, unless I tell you how it all works, you're not going to be able to do it on your own. So you gotta lead them down the road so they can do it independently.
Yeah. So you should say to yourself, what would Jeff do
What
in
would Jeff do?
every situation? What would
Yeah,
Jeff do? What would Jeff
see,
do?
that would make a good bumper sticker, Tom.
You're gonna. I'm all about t-shirts right now, so that's
Oh,
totally
t-shirt. Okay.
resonate. What would Jeff do? We'll have to do that. So one follow up on the segment here is we're working on a number of recompetes right now. So
Mhm.
is there like, do you have recommendations from like an incumbent perspective versus someone who's looking to unseat an incumbent when it comes to, like realism and reasonablism? Because when you're
Mhm.
not the incumbent, you don't know
Yeah.
what that is. But you
Yeah.
being the incumbent, I think sometimes it's 10 times harder because you know too much, right?
Yes.
And obviously you're recompeting it, you want to be, profitable, you want to kind of, like add profit to you want to, but at the same time, the customer knows where you're coming from too. So any advice for
Sure.
incumbents versus someone who's trying to unseat when it comes to reasonableness and reasonable and realism?
We're
I'm
gonna
really
test you.
struggling here.
We're gonna keep making you say it over and over again. No, no. So for the incumbent, I want you to remember what it felt like when you proposed on that
Mhm.
requirement the first time, right? Go back to how you originally felt. Like, I'm not gonna say dismiss, what you learned over the 5, 10 years that you've been working on this contract, but you need to look at your proposal as if it's a first time through. Hey, we need this contract in order to expand our civilian business doing whatever it is. Treat step outside the shoes of that incumbent contractor. And I know that's probably good technical advice as well as cost evaluation advice. But yeah, you got to treat it. It's like it's a new requirement to your firm. And without that, you're going that mentality will ensure that you don't demonstrate incumbentitis, right? Simple as that. Like that whole, we trust that, we know we've been doing this for this long, and this is how much it costs. No, no, no. Just say this is how much it will cost because this, that, and the other thing. And then if you're the non-incumbent, you've done your homework, you've seen how much has been spent on the requirement, and understand how is the requirement changed. Let's not forget about that. Not all recompetes are
Right.
created equal. The scopes often change. They often consolidate requirements. I'll take a little bit of something that's been elsewhere and be like, well, why don't we
Like a
throw
little
that else
something.
in? So please be careful. And when you do your research, has the scope changed? If
Comparing
you
apples
try
to
to
you're playing apples
propose,
to oranges. Yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you're gonna be underpricing yourself, and you're gonna fight you as all heck to try to make that a realism cost. Someone's gonna be looking at that pricing and be like,
Mhm.
wow, they
Yeah.
really shaved
He'll get
down on
us.
hours.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's gonna look really bad. That's gonna show as you do not understand the requirements, right? So you'll see that language within uh RFPs that say you price it so low that you seems like you misunderstand the requirements. We have the right to throw you out. Like, you won't even come to the competitive range. You will not be asked to come back for a best and final offer. It's just, don't do that. So, I mean, that's a simplistic advice for the newbie, but keep that in mind. So, yeah, to me, again, it's all about following those instructions and demonstrating how
yeah,
you follow those instructions, and then going that extra step. Because what's your strategy in winning? Is your strategy to win because of a new novel approach, because of new technologies? And if that's the case, it may be a premium. to what the government has been living with for the last 5 or 10 years. Great. Then, again, not to get away from your realism and realism with this, but you got to then talk about why that premium is worth the return on, you should demonstrate what the return of investment. If that agency, by spending an extra 5-10%, is going to save a whole ton of money in the future because your program is going to help reduce fraud, waste, and abuse in other parts of the agency, or help, take down missiles. You're an anti-missile defense system, and you're going to have a lot more accuracy. Damn right, the government's going to want to pay you a premium for that. And so that's a technical approach, but then your costing has to then match that premium approach. Because, that RFP talks about best value. Absolutely, the source selection authority is able to authorize a premium for the higher valued services. You don't,
Yeah.
if it's a best value procurement, don't think you have to be the lowest price in order to win.
No, exactly. So that's actually a really good point to make, and great segue into our next segment here, on behind the strategy, the cost team's technical approach. So, what kind of insights can you offer on how cost evaluation teams evaluate proposals? Like, now we're going to get into the mindset of the evaluators. Um, and how can our intellectuals use this knowledge to align their bids better? And have you witnessed any strategic decisions during the cost evaluations that have turned potential losses into winning bids? Because I think that would be really helpful to kind of see. I like to teach in scenarios of, here's a story and here's how we approached it. Not necessarily saying use this approach and this is going to work for you, because every scenario is so different. But I think sometimes seeing the questions and the challenges that others have encountered really kind of may help you in your own scenario.
Absolutely. Lots of great questions. All right. So let's peek behind the curtain. All right. My first
Yeah.
reminder with proposal evaluation is, as of today, 2024, people, real life humans, are evaluating your proposals. Okay. I'm going to
AI is
make that
not
very,
doing
very
it.
clear.
What?
I mean, that I think will come down the road. But for now, remember, these are real people. So if you've been really crappy to those people over the previous couple of months, what do you think their initial foray into your proposal is going to be like? I always throw that out, and to remind people, it's a very basic thing, but you better start kissing up those 3 to 6 months before the proposal. All right, I'm throwing it out there. I'm just telling you what I felt like. I've heard evaluators. I've been behind those curtains, and they're just sit there and be like, "Man, that guy has been a real jerk to me," and I'm cleaning up the language for you, even though I know outside this podcast you may be okay with it. But it happens. It happens all the time. All right. So let's always keep that in mind. All right. So from a cost evaluation standpoint, let's focus only on that. Again, you're mostly going to have people like me who are not technical experts do the first run through your proposals. I mean, sometimes they will and sometimes they won't, but I'm going to say mostly, whether it's a contracting officer who's usually more of a generalist and really understands FAR and how to acquire goods. But when it comes to understanding how AI is deployed and developed, or other software is developed, not their strength, and nor is it mine. So you got to keep that in mind, that at least the initial evaluation of your cost proposal is going to be from technical dummies. And I mean that in the most loving way, because I'm talking about myself. And so when you talk to technical dummies in your cost proposal, you have to use as plain language as you can when it comes to describing how you came up with your rates and costs. That being said, your BOEs, yeah, they got to be a bit technical, because once the technical team is done with their evaluation and scoring your strengths and weaknesses over in the technical side, they're going to come and join the cost team and be like, listen, this approach is totally undoable. They totally neglected the quality assurance side. of implementing this, integrating the software. We got to add a bunch of hours for that. So you got to talk enough technical to satisfy those folks when they come over and want to evaluate the hours, the labor mixes, and the quantity of supplies and or other cloud hours or whoever else is necessary. But us cost evaluators, we're all about the numbers. So do your spreadsheets actually link properly? Do your spreadsheets, use the right formulas? You use the right lookup formulas, whatever it may be. Man, please make sure all those damn links work. Don't piss us number of people off. We're going to first look for that completeness. Did you provide all the data points that section L asked for? So we literally go down and check off the list. Then we start doing some math checks, making sure that if you have to provide a flat file that has all your files in a CSV format and that it all rolls up properly, make that as easy as possible for us, please. And then that all being said, then we're gonna see, what indirect rates did you use? Are you using forward pricing rates? Are you using provisional billing rates? And if you look at your provisional billing rate letter from your administrative contracting officer, it specifically says these are not supposed to be used for pricing. However, maybe in your budgeting, your provisional rates, you assume that you're going to win this bid. And that's your explanation as to why do you use your provisional billing rates as your indirect rates. So explain it. And why is that still a reasonable, realistic cost estimate for your indirect costs? Talk about it. Don't let us come up with those questions that say, I don't know if they really consider this contract award. I think we need to take their G&A base and do something with it. I don't know if they added enough cyber security costs in their G&A pool to, given all the additional CUI that'll be provided within this contract. Eliminate those questions, or at least try to address those anticipated questions so you don't run into those kinds of troubles. So we're gonna do all those math checks. We're gonna do an initial look at those basis of estimates for the rates. Did you use actual people who currently work in those labor positions, or did you try to steal it off the super cheapo GSA schedule rate for someone who lives in Iowa for an effort that's going to take place in New York City? You think that's a reasonable basis of estimate for labor in that market? I don't think that's very realistic. So don't make those kinds of basic mistakes. Don't call, cost adjustments are not the end all, meaning because you have a cost adjustment, you're going to get thrown out. It just means we're just going to adjust your most probable cost to what the government sees as what we really should be
So
comparing.
can you explain the
Let's go down
cost
that road.
adjustment? Because
Yeah.
and we don't have to go into like any great detail, but I think that's one term that I know that's been kind of thrown out that I'm just like, I don't really quite understand what that really means. What's the impact to, the offer, and how does the government,
Perfect.
define that?
Perfect segue. Yes.
Yeah.
So we get in 5 proposals from 5 different offers, and each has its own proposed price. When it comes to the source selection evaluation board and the authority having to make decisions about who stays within the competitive range, we'll line up all the 5 offers and all the various strengths and weaknesses, and then we'll show the proposed price. But when it comes down to actually evaluating them side by side, and what, using your term for earlier, more of an apples to apples approach, they want to be using what they determine to be the most probable price, or should cost. And the reason for that is, if someone neglected a certain requirement within the contract, I can't make them look like they're super cheap if they didn't price something out. So I'm going to have to add a certain amount of cost to be like, well, they inadequately addressed this certain requirement within the RFP. I'm going to add another $2 million to their cost. So when I'm comparing the offers to each other, that's going to be included within it. Or if they made a math mistakes or whatever it may be.
Okay.
So that should cost is the basis for, okay, now who's in the competitive range after we make those adjustments. So yeah, you think you're coming in as that super low cost provider and have flimsy reasons for your cost reasonableness. You're going to take a cost that you thought that was going to be 5 or 10% below the average price of your competitors, and you can easily end up being 10% higher than everyone else.
Higher.
And if your technical evaluation is satisfactory and showing a premium, you're probably not going to make that competitive range.
Yeah.
So if your strategy is to be low price effort, you better show how that's realistic if you're going to make it to that next round.
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, though, the bottom line is, and the key takeaway would be to make sure you're just explicitly clear and explain how and what you're presenting. And it seems so elementary, to say that. I'm just like, God, I feel like I'm insulting someone's intelligence by saying, can you explain to me how you got these numbers? And it's almost kind of like talking to my 14-year-old about why you can't just give me a math answer. You got to show me how you arrived at that answer. He's like, well, I
Show your
just
work.
did. Right.
That's
Like,
a
show
great
me your
analogy.
work. Right.
That's a great analogy.
So,
Show your
and
work.
I think,
Yep.
yeah, and so I think a cost proposal is kind of like the show your work to, like an eighth grade, like an eighth grade math problem is don't, make the evaluators assume or guess how you got to there. Like, give them this warm and fuzzy that you understand and that you can explain it, because like at the end of the day, you have to justify it. So why not just start out of the gate with, justifying, explaining, your cost to the evaluators.
I think you're asking, but I want to make a point on is you talked about show your work, and I'm here to tell you here in your super value added section here, Tom, you're allowed to push the envelope. Okay. I want you to push the envelope. And I've seen many companies come on, the typical term you've heard is management challenges. Management challenges can work. Okay. Do they always work? No, but they can work. And that's where you fall into the gray world of cost realism analysis. And we struggle with that in cost evaluation teams most times. But that doesn't mean you can't do it or shouldn't do it. But you should definitely push the envelope. But that's where you see yourself being more competitive. Issue those competitive, be like, listen, we typically incur about 10% of direct labor charges as a project management cost. On this project, we're going to strive to only do it at 8%. And this is why we think we can do it. We're going to start using AI or machine learning tools to help produce our status reports, resource levels, and evaluations, whatever it may be. You go through that and you might not be able to demonstrate it to a past performance or a past project where the history clearly shows it as something higher. You can still go lower and say, listen, this is how we're going to do this. And if we're not going to make it, I'm actually going to cap those costs. So those are two different approaches you can take. So you can leave the management challenge as is and leave the pricing and cross your fingers that the government says, I don't know how likely that is. I'll make an adjustment. Or they'll say, I'll buy off on it and leave it as is. It's often a 50-50 split. But if you want the government to, no matter what, to accept it as is, cap it. That means, listen, I am willing to sign on the contract that my G&A rate will not exceed X%.
Oh,
The
wow.
government then cannot make a probable cost adjustment higher than that cap. If you sign, I will not accept a G&A rate above this proposed rate. Then that is one way to prevent a probable cost adjustment. So if you want a strategy, those are the two ways to do it.
So use
So
the
something,
word cap.
use the word cap. use
Okay. Words mattered, people.
ceiling, expressly say, I will not exceed this cap. And if you say that, they should not make an adjustment to that area. So that is one strategy.
Okay.
You're like, listen, no matter what happens, I lose this other big contract. I have another contract up for recompete next year, and I feel so good about that I'll keep that so my G&A rate doesn't double next year. Well, I'm not going to do that to you. I am honorable. I have integrity. Whatever it takes. Again, back to my point when we started this section. Like, these are people. They need to believe you. So go through that rationale so they feel better about the decisions they make in terms of their evaluation. So there's hard caps, and then there's soft caps, like challenges and the like, saying, listen, this is how we're going to get costs down. I'm going to award my people incentive bonuses if they keep this, whatever it takes to make you go, oh yeah, they really are going to try to make this happen and we're going to win as a result. Sharing award fee, there's another one
Yeah.
for you. If that, it's that kind of a contract, sharing that award fee with your subcontractors and passing that along as profit distribution and not as a cost to your subcontracts. That's another unique strategy I have seen successfully used by offers. I mean, it's a pain in the butt to track on the back end when you do win the contract that way, and so you don't end up claiming those shared award fees as costs. So you got to get
So how does that work? How does that work for the government customer if you propose that? Because I've never heard of that.
Oh, look at that. I got something unique for you. All right, go me. Yeah, so like you get your award fee board meets and you get a great rating and you get a great allocation of fee. You can say, listen, I'm going to take 1% of that fee and say, if I get a certain score, I can literally pick that up and share it with my subcontract to do whatever they want with that. So it's truly, you would show it as a cost on your books, but you won't be, but it's a non-billable cost to the government. So yeah,
Okay.
so it's an additional way to incentivize your subs to be a part of your
Yeah.
team. And I'm not going to say it always works, but it's a unique process, a unique approach to incentivizing your teaming partners to really, to deliver. I would never recommend an award fee subcontract. That's even more levels of complexity. It's bad enough to even just do the cost plus part, but then do the award part. That can get not so ideal. But when your prime contract is an award fee, that could work. Could. I'm not going to, I'm sure you can get on a bunch of COOs, CEOs who have tried employing this and they can talk about their war stories. And I'm not going to try to go there, but I can just tell you from a costing perspective, that's one way to help incentivize your subs to propose a lower fee to start out with, knowing that, listen, you do a good job, I'm going to throw you an extra 1%.
Well, you could also do that too I'm thinking from a sub perspective. If you're coming in as a sub,
Mm-hmm.
as part of a negotiation, it's like, say, listen, I'm going to give you like super great rates for work share or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or award fee, right? Like you share your award fee with me. I'm willing to kind of meet you in the middle here on something. So it could be a really good sub negotiation. Um,
100%. There's a lot of flexibility, as you know, with
okay.
subs and get creative. So since you brought up subs, and maybe you're going to ask me about this later, but I want to tell you that subs is a big risk area for cost evaluators. I've definitely,
Sure.
you asked me about, what turns a potential loss into potential win. There are too many examples I have of winning bids that turn into losses, and it's because of those flipping subs. As a prime, there's only so much you can control. And, when the government says, listen, have your sub submit a sealed package directly to us for review, you're crossing your fingers and saying, I'm trusting you, do the right thing. I can't begin to tell you, you have a sub that represents, 20% of your overall bid, and I get a sealed package that's as thick as this one piece of paper here. That's not a good sign usually. Um, so be careful of
Yeah.
that. Know your subs. Maybe you want to hire an independent party to take a look at that sealed package before it goes into that government. I've been part of that kind of a team before. Um, but that is a make a break moment.
Um, Transitioning here to our next segment, which is audit readiness
Hmm.
as a strategic asset. So, from your experience, what are the essential elements of preparing for an audit to showcase your cost realism? Because audits, they're no joke and they can be really scary. I'm scared to say the word audit.
Well, I try to be a nice auditor, and we understand that the government is looking to fulfill its mission. And for me to come in combative and to make you feel bad and not want to do work with the government, why would you stay? All right, that point out of the way. Let's talk about why you're talking about an audit during a competitive source selection. And the reason Tan brought this up is that I've seen agencies, in order to avoid problems with evaluating cost realism, they say, listen, as part of this competitive source selection, we may employ auditors to come in and take a look at your
Mm,
proposals in depth in order for us to help evaluate cost realism and reasonableness and completeness. And yeah, and I've seen Department of Energy and Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services, two civilian agencies off the top of my head, who have done this. And they may or may not do it. It's one of those, we may employ auditors. And no matter how much info they ask for in section L, they just say, hey, listen, it just might be easier to cover ourselves to ask the auditors to go in and just ask all the questions that you normally would if you were submitting a change order proposal under existing contract or a request for equitable adjustment, something that's, real high risk to the government of someone saying, oh, let me ask for all this free money. But I, no, I'm going to ask for an auditor to make sure that I'm paying something that's fair and reasonable. Well, this is a little bit different, that the auditors are coming in and being like, are you telling me the full story? Indirect rates are a huge cost realism risk for the government. A lot of companies will come in and say, yeah, historically we have a RAP rate. I'm just throwing numbers out. Don't take these as gospel at 1.9. But under this contract, we could do it for 1.7. All right.
mm,
There's only so much you can do in a sort of a one-sided dialogue that says, well, prove it to me. And then, we talked about, trying to be as complete as possible in order to prove it. But when you have the auditors in there, you can at least have that iterative process where the
mhm.
auditors will ask those kind of in-depth questions and see the details uh, between what has actually been incurred and what are you thinking that's going to go forward, and why does that make sense? Let me employ these parametric analysis techniques. Let me really ask the difficult questions to the control account managers who manage those budgets, those certain accounts, and be like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to continue operating your program without getting this kind of support? And then you take those results, you pick it up and say, listen, I don't believe a word that they're saying. I recommend that 1.9. Sorry, that could happen. So how to succeed in those audits is, yeah, you see that, especially you see that potential for audit clause in the RFP. You better have some pretty substantive reasons for how you came up with your estimates, other than I just want to win this at all costs. That's not going to work when you play with your costs. You want to play with your profit, play with your profit all you want. Uh, and you want to play, tell your subs, be like, look, the only way we're going to do this is for you to meet these target prices. That's probably going to be okay too, because you're going to end up getting that quote, keep those quotes down. But when it comes to you as a prime contractor, uh, to get to a low cost, watch the games that you play, and can it withstand an audit? Simple as that. And the way to winning over the auditors is good documentation.
So,
Most audits, it's all about that.
yeah, so I was going to ask you about the documentation part.
Yep.
Is first of all, who are the auditors? Are they government GS employees? Are they contractors working on behalf of the agency? Because I know, like contractors get kind of funny about other contractors coming in, even though there's always like this contractor has a signed NDA, like they give you like awareness ahead of time who's going to be part of the evaluation team and who's supporting the government. So, first of all, are they other government contractors filling in this contractor role? Or are they, actual, government employees who are the auditors? But what rights or access do they have to information? Um, Emails, correspondences, like, agreements, different things like that. You're nodding like yes to all of that, or like,
Correct. That's absolutely correct. You got it. So I've seen it both ways. So it could absolutely be DCAA. It could absolutely
okay,
be cost and price analysts that are
yeah,
actual government employees, but it could also be independent CPA firms. Like I said, we've done this for a number of times
yeah,
for my civilian agency customers, where they hire us and say, "Hey, listen, I need you to act as our auditors." And like I said, the RFP states it very plainly that we may contract with a third party firm to perform an audit of
mhm,
your proposal. So when you're submitting your proposal, you're essentially tacitly agreeing to that audit if the contracting officer determines it necessary. Have I had some pushback as that independent public accounting firm saying, I don't want you looking at this. You're going to share this with my competitors. I'm like, look, I'm just like the cost evaluation team for the government. I have 3 different teams, 5 different teams looking at all the offers proposals. We're not going to share with each other, and we're certainly not going to share what you propose compared to what your offers propose, and ask them the question about, hey, ABC company said that the basis for their LCAT rate was this. What is yours? Like, no, like I would be out of a job. Um, uh, there'd be so many, we'd be in so many trouble that, you know, ruin our reputation, and I would never
yeah.
do that. But that being
Well, it's
said,
yeah,
you doesn't mean you can't ask for your own NDA. All right, that's what I was getting at.
right.
So if you still feel that comfortable, I'm not going to play the lawyer on this call, but you feel that's necessary to protect your proprietary information, by all means do that. But just know that a CPA firm like mine has
Mhm.
think about how many different financial statements and tax information we have for companies that compete against each other. It's really bad for business for me to take
Yeah.
that data and share it with anyone else.
I wholehearted and I'm in a similar boat, too.
Yeah. Do
I
you
I
have
come in all the
competitive
I come
tech?
oh my god. I know everyone's win strategies. I know
Yeah.
where all their bodies are buried, like, I've
Yes.
helped bury some of them, like, yes. So
Yes.
but I still do have customers who are like, "Well, I'm not gonna share this with them." Like, I have this one customer who, like, will not share the questions that they ask the government, and I'm like, why would you not share that with me? It's like it's going to be public knowledge that you asked the question, but okay. At the end of the day, that's companies are funny about what they want to share and what they don't want to share, and um, I always like to say that if you're going to be really restrictive of me, it's like, listen, you're not special. I've seen behind the scenes of everybody, and I have yet to find that special unicorn. I think I may have found once, like one special unicorn somewhere,
Right.
but yeah, no, your management plan is not any like super secret sexy sauce that, that I haven't seen somewhere else before.
Bingo.
But
Bingo.
I
Yeah. Oh
digress.
yeah. Oh yeah. Disclosed
Um,
practices, you name it. It's like, great. I've seen it all, but I'm gonna make you feel like
yeah.
you're that
Yeah,
unique. Yep.
exactly.
100%. 100%. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So so I lost my like train of thought on the auditing part, but I've been meaning to ask you about the types of contracts, whether it's cost plus, fixed price, T&M, and stuff. Um, does the auditing process become more complex, or like more difficult depending upon what type of contract it is, or is it just pretty straightforward regardless of what type?
Yeah. So let's keep this in the competitive source selection standpoint. I mean, I can talk
Yeah.
proposal audits all day, but you're most likely going to see an audit if it's a cost plus scenario, right? That's where
Okay.
realism is the highest risk. Someone wants to come in and say,
Mhm.
"Oh yeah, it's only going to cost this much," but then they'll come up with some bogus reasons to pick on the statement of work. Like, you didn't really clarify this very well, so I'm going to submit a change order for this huge increase. Like, that's what the government wants to totally avoid, right? There's an occasional opportunity for government to want to evaluate cost realism if it's a fixed price contract, because they're too worried about uh, you know true buy-ins by those contractors. Again, propose a really low price, it's fixed price, it's like, well, good enough, let's just give it to them, it's fixed price. But then, well, did you actually look at their financial capability? Can they afford to do it at this what seems to be a super discount? It's not going to do you any good if the contractor doesn't exist after a couple of months for doing this at such a huge discount.
Because we
So you
can't
may
afford to do it.
exactly. So you may want that kind of assessment or that kind of an audit. But yeah, so it's going to be more of the flexibly priced contracts that you'll see a potential for an audit in a source selection environment. So it could happen for T&M. T&M, there's only so much auditors can do, because you're really, we may still want to look at that fixed rate and challenge them on how realistic that is. Like, all right, you're going to do that, but your people are you still going to maintain the salaries, or are you really going to like take a hit within your indirect rates and challenge your company to absorb that potential of a loss? Or what are you going to do to expand your business to do that? Anyways, so there's still critical questions that we can ask for that. But yeah, it really is meant for cost plus opportunities.
Cost plus, yeah. Yeah, because firm fixed is what it is, right? So, like those contracts are the best. So it's like, yeah, I ran a firm fixed price contract at like 25% profitability one time, and they're like, "Oh my God, hey, I proposed a solution, I proposed a price, and the government was good with it. So how I run it and how efficiently I run it, that's on me." So,
Bingo,
anyways,
bingo.
yeah,
That's
firm
why I want to
fixed.
do I want to do as much as I can firm fix. But if there's a lot I don't know, no, I don't want to start down
Right.
that road.
No. So this kind of wraps up our like last segment here on best
Okay.
practices and cutting edge strategies for cost evaluation. Are there some new trends or tools on how contractors can approach realism in their proposals?
I don't think that much has changed there. But now that contractors have access to more data, how to present that, like, use those tools. Be like, look, I've done a cross-cutting analysis of all my projects I've done for the last 5 years and all these different agencies, and here are the trends. So you can definitely, I've started seeing, use those folks using that, cost trending charts, and cost of value relationships. What are the causal and beneficial relationships that have caused my wrap rates to vacillate as they have, and this is how we're going to control that. So using that power of data, I've seen that a lot. So it's better, instead of the picking and choosing, which is usually easy to pick up and say, here's this and here's that. You may want to do that because that makes you look better if you end up taking everything. But if you have the power to be like, look, I am awesome at project management. Look how consistent I am over these 30 projects. Use that and show it. So the power of analytics can be used to impress and to give confidence in realism. Absolutely.
Jeff, you've given us as far as like takeaways here a lot.
Yeah. The only thing couple things, I guess. Don't be afraid of your cost analysis, and the way you've done it. It may not be consistent with what you've done in the past. If you have a new strategy, go for it. As long as you follow the instructions, you're going to be fine. All right. So I'd say that's one. Like, the government is always looking for unique solutions, and they may not be able to get it uh, as fast as they want. But if you start showing that innovation, so lead them to where you want to be and how you want to propose it. We haven't talked much about commercial products and services and how that could be involved in a in a procurement. You deem something commercial and propose it that way. Ask about it that way. So, you're selling a certain service or product on the open market for a certain price. You say, listen, this is what I'm charging commercially. This is what I'm going to charge to you as well. And, then the government should not have to pick into how the cost build up for those commercial items. And so that could be an advantage and be like, look, and that's also, again, on the technical side, it's like, look, it's been used out in public. People have been using it in satellites to look at, Google Maps or whatever. Similar kind of thing here for federal procurements. So yeah, so those are a couple things we have not talked about. I wanted to throw in there, but at the end of the day, though, it comes down to the basics. What did you propose? How did you get there? And make it as easy as possible for the evaluators to understand.
Hope that you found this discussion on cost realism as enlightening as we did, and that you're walking away with. And remember that mastering the details of your cost proposal can truly set yourself apart from your competition. And thanks again to our intellectual listeners today. And remember, you have to think big to win big, be an intellectual. And until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of possibilities.